Is your child actually struggling to learn, or are they being pushed through a system that wasn't designed for them? In this episode, we explore the hidden damage of labeling and testing children based on a standard that ignores their real strengths and what emerges when we finally remove that pressure. Hello, my name is Janae Daniels. I'm a wife, a mother of 6, and a former middle school teacher turned homeschool mom. I have kids in their 20s all the way down to elementary age and everything in between. Are you thinking about pulling your kids from the school system like I did, but you are scared to death and don't know what to do next? Well, my friends, I felt the same way, and you have come to the right place. I'm here to help your family leave the system so that you can take the hearts and minds of your children back. Welcome to the School to Homeschool podcast. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm very excited for today's guest. Today we have on Zahra Lightway. Zara is a former classroom teacher, school founder, and a lifelong student of how children actually learn. After more than a decade inside traditional education, both as a teacher and as a parent, she began asking harder questions. Her search led her deep into 150 plus years of alternative education research and into lived experimentation with hundreds of families. She went on to found Lightway School in Texas, launched the Dream of a Better World Saturday Youth Empowerment Program, and run an immersive summer camp, all grounded in what would become the Lightway system. Today, through Lightway Learning, Zara teaches home educators that exact system, a structured relational approach to self-directed learning that gives parents both freedom and framework. So Zara, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Janae. I'm super excited to be here with you because I'm just such a fan of all your content. It's
Oh,
brilliant.
I appreciate that. Well, let's dig into how this all came about. Rewind to the beginning with your own experience and children. And so let's rewind.
Yeah, I have to go back quite a long way. So I actually started going to alternative education conferences and things back in the early twos. And I ended up buying the Aero founder, Alternative Education Resource Organization, his book called, I think it was No Homework and Recess All Day. I don't know if you've read that one. It's quite
I have
interesting,
no.
by Jerry Mintz. And at that time, I was in my late 30s, early 40s. And I remember the day I was in my office and I turned the page. And there it started talking about a school that Bronson Alcott had founded back in the 1800s. And I saw the name and I thought, could that really be, is that Louisa May Alcott's father? Is there a connection here? And it turned out that it was actually. And the reason I'm
Wow.
sharing that is because when I was 11, I could not stop reading Louisa May Alcott's book, Little Men, over and over and over. And every time I read it, I was like, yes, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is the way that relationships between adults and how things go down between adults and children is supposed to happen. This feels so good. They're all together. And she always leaned into consequences of children's actions rather than into punishments and things like that. And it
Interesting.
was just beautiful. And I realized that since the age of 11, I'd had this passion for making learning and education kind of go back more to being this natural process, right? Instead of this curated in a box out of society, right? And a really good example of that feeling, that sense is, right now I live in New Zealand. I've been living here about 10 years. And every summer, which is in December, January, right around Christmas and everything, or where I live, it's a very small community. So you notice things more, right? And every summer the kids are everywhere. And I remember one day, would have been in February when the school year starts. I was walking around in the village and I went, something's missing. What's missing? And I realized it was the energy of the children. And I said to someone, has school back in? They're like, yeah, went back in like a couple of days ago. I'm like, okay, that's it. And it's like literally they're gone. And that imprinted it on me even more. Like I felt so sad, right? And it really sunk in then how we just remove our children from life.
Yeah.
by doing this, right? So that's kind of a very big picture. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, I think you did. So
Yeah,
at that point, age 11, you realized you saw something different. And then what happened as you had children of your own? Now, how many kids do you have?
yeah. I just have one, my son Sean, and he's well grown now. He's 38. He'll be 39 in a couple of months. How that happened, I don't know. Here we are.
It goes so fast.
Well, yeah, it does go really fast. I think so. How did I get that? I think really my real journey into actually becoming a part of the education system as we know it and learning began when I was in college in Houston.
Hmm.
And of course, I grew up in the UK and I went to K-12 in the UK, even though it's not called that there. So I had that experience of that system. And then I also went to France for a while and I experienced that system a little bit. I did a year of university there and then finished everything up in Texas. And I noticed that every time I was in the book stacks, I would just get really excited when I saw at the library, right? When I saw books about education and so on, and I just couldn't get enough of reading them. And I was just so into it, but I still didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And then I started tutoring other students who were taking my classes with me. And I thought, wow, I really like doing this. And and then I saw that movie, Dangerous Minds. Was it Dangerous Minds? The one where she goes into the school? Yeah, it was back in the 80s and it had, or no, 90s. Um, and it was Michelle Pfeiffer and she kind of goes in and saves the kids, right? And I thought, I really do have a passion for this. I really want
Yeah.
to go and help kids. So I said, right, I'm going to go and teach. It will fit my life. It ticks so many boxes. I can make a difference. I really want to get in and, work with these kids. And of course, I'm going to be that amazing teacher that just turns them all around and all of this. Yeah, I think a lot of people go in thinking that they can do that, right?
Yeah.
And you can definitely connect with and move and help some of the kids. But so I entered into a high school in South Houston where they had gang initiations in the hallway in October.
Wow.
And I mean, that makes it sound really, really bad. I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as that sounds. But that is one thing that happened. They would just jump on them and stuff. But you didn't get the impression that kids were walking around with guns or anything. It wasn't quite like that.
Yeah.
And this was before the days of, this was 1997. This was before the days of, oh, sorry, I can't even say it, children having to go through bloody metal detectors on
Yeah.
their way into school and have their bags searched. I mean, I saw that much later. Anyway, so I started and I also had a cultural thing to deal with of not knowing really any Spanish and not really understanding. And I'd never been inside an American high school in my life. So there was a lot to deal with. It was a trial by fire.
Wow.
And I remember the day my mentor asked me how it was going. And I said, well, there's some days I can't imagine doing anything else. And there's days where I never want to come back again. And she looked at me and she goes, well, that means you're a teacher. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, so I kept going. And then, but I'd always wanted to teach French. So those first couple of years it was English. And then it was I moved to middle school and did 3 years of middle school English. And then I got the
Yay.
opportunity to go and teach French in a middle school as well in Houston. And that changed me. And I'll tell you why. It's because at that middle school, all the kids were choosing my class. They
Mhm.
chose to take French. They didn't have to. And they stayed with me. Well, there would be like a taster for 6 weeks in sixth grade. And then they'd be with me for seventh grade and eighth grade. And at the end of eighth grade, they could get the high school credit for the French class, right?
Mhm.
And the difference was night and day. The difference was incredible. It was like they really wanted to learn and they would work hard, you know. And I also developed some quite innovative ways of dealing with the system, but that would be a different topic. But so that started to awaken in me some deep questions. I'm like, well, why are we forcing children to do these things? Now, I will say When I was in school, I actually was one of those, the 20% that academic system kind of works for,
Mm-hmm.
right? I did well. I liked it. To this day, I like being in a room of people and learning together. I really do like that. But I saw that that wasn't the case for so many of the students that I had, right? They were not thriving at all and they were struggling. And I let go of a few things so that more of them could pass my class. Like I made homework optional for extra credit rather than if you don't do it, you lose,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're going to fail. That was revolutionary. That changed
Love
my
that.
passing from like 70% to like well over 90, right? Because those
Nice.
kids that didn't have that environment at home to support them no longer had that pressure. And I just figured if they could do it in class, then does it really matter if they do and some homework? And it was beautiful. So, okay, I'm digressing.
No, I
Um,
I love it. Well, and I love really quick that you brought up they chose your class. That's how it was for me too. I was a theater
yeah.
teacher and they chose my class. And so whereas other teachers had a harder time with the core teachers had a harder time with
Mm,
things, I was like, "Oh, I don't deal with that." Just because the kids want to be there. They were excited. It was their break throughout their day because it was fun. We got to play and
yeah.
still learn stuff. So, anyway, but go
Yeah.
on, go on.
No, totally. It was a break from the relentless pressure of you have to get ready for the test if you don't get ready
Right.
for the test. And see, and also in the 90s, that's when they passed No Child Left Behind, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Thank you so much. They forgot to ask, where are we actually going to take them? It's like we won't
Right.
leave them behind, but we don't have a worthwhile place to take them, which
Right.
some people might disagree with. But so from there, I carried on in my journey and I actually had this kind of awakening in late 2003. And by the spring semester of 2004, I knew I just couldn't keep going. I couldn't face coming back for another year where going through that whole, all the paperwork stuff, all the just the rigmarole around it, it just felt so heavy. And my heart just said, no, it's time for you to stop. And I'm like, well, I'm a single parent and I have a child still in high school. I'm just going to stop. And it was very clear, yeah, you're just going to stop. Okay. And this was just, you know, my inner voice, which I've learned to trust over the years. So I did. I stepped out and I spent the next 2 years. That's when I went to the AERO conference, Alternative Education Resource Organization conference. I went to the IDEC, the International Democratic Education Conference that was held in Vancouver. I ended up starting that Saturday program for kids, which was very much based in well, it was very much based in unschooling, which I know John Holt, yay, he came up with that word. I really don't like it. I don't
I
like,
don't like that term either.
I keep trying to come up with a different one. So actually, that's kind of where I came up with the Lightway system, which is like unschooling, but there's a few more components that make it something else as well. But I thought I'd rather be doing something than unsomething.
Right.
Right. So, where was I? Oh, yeah, I went to the International Democratic Education Conference in Vancouver and started my Saturday program. So, the Saturday program was based on kids tapping into their true passions, but it was very, very difficult for these children to really step out of that other system for just one day a week, right? They anything that sounded like learning or let's do a project, if it involved paper and pen, they kind of didn't want to do it. But you know, we did yoga, we did meditation, we started a community garden. In fact, April of 2008, I think it was, because we did this community garden where they were learning to grow food and everything, the city of Houston declared that Lightway Schools Day because it was part of this whole bigger city community effort to more towards more sustainability. And you know, I noticed with the kids, well, and the other part of that program that was so important was that it raised youth voice, right? So the empowerment piece came in with we had circle meetings each week. They all got to speak to whatever was on their minds, whatever was in their hearts. They got to make up the rules of the program. And, you know, what's amazing about that, that happens in these schools, there are plenty of schools where that happens, right?
Mhm.
And what's amazing about it is adults always think, well, that's just going to be total anarchy, right? It's going to be crazy. Kids don't want rules. But actually, they want more rules than adults would ever think to have. And they want it about things that adults would never think that they would want it about. So there's a story out of Summer Hill School in the UK of a young person arriving to the school. So this is a boarding school. It's kind of the epitome of free democratic schools. And the child arrived and was shown the rule book, and he looked in and said, oh, he was skeptical, I don't believe any kids would agree that you shouldn't skateboard inside. And the young man showing him around was like, yeah, actually, so what happened is this girl was walking through and there was a splinter on the floor from the floorboards that had been damaged by the skateboard, and she brought it to the school council, and yeah, everybody agreed that that probably shouldn't be happening, and so we made up this rule for it. And he was like, oh, oh,
I love
okay,
it.
right? It's great. And the other part of it is that the kids will always hold you to it, right? So in our Lightway system, I come up with this thing called family, where you sit in circle and actually work within your home to create that similar kind of system. And I always tell families, tell parents, just be careful what you agree to, because they will hold you to it, like
Oh, yes, they
to the
will.
letter. If you say
Oh,
you're going to
yes,
do
they
it at
will.
9 o'clock, especially in that concrete thinking stage, right? 7 to like 14. If you say we've agreed we're doing this at 9 o'clock, if you're 1 minute late and there's a consequence that's been decided, then they will hold you to it. Whereas you
Yeah.
might, be a little bit, let them get, oh, it's just a little bit over or whatever. The kids aren't. It's like,
Mm-mm.
do it. So be very careful. It's
It's
wonderful
true.
though. They love it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I see that especially with my 10-year-old. She's like, you said that at this time we would do this, and it is this time. And so now it's time to do it.
Exactly.
And if you don't do it, then you're lying, and we're not supposed to be liars. I'm like,
Oh, yes, that's it exactly. Yeah, yeah. And what we saw at the Saturday program, because I ran it out of my house for like 3 years, and one mother told me, her son had been really, really depressed and really not doing well. He was a little bit different, a little quirky, I would say. And so that doesn't go down well in public schools, really. People get
no.
relentlessly bullied for being just anything that's not at all exactly inside this little box, right? And she said it saved his life, like literally, because he was able to speak and be heard. And now he's this confident young man. I mean, he'd be, what was that, 2008? He's in his, what if he was 11 then? How old would he? Oh, God, I don't even want to think about it. Okay. So he's older. And
Yeah, I was gonna say that's about to age you. So,
yeah, yeah.
and me too, actually, because
Yeah, it's not that easy, right? So, um, yeah, from there, I did the summer camp, and it was the same basic principles, and the kids loved it. And we went on, and then I went on to found my micro school, which opened its doors in 2009. Well, we all know what happened in 2008 economically. It was not a great time to start
yeah,
a private school. But here was the thing, because people would say, well, why didn't you do a charter school? And it's because if you do a charter school, then you're tied to state funding, and
right,
then there's strings, and they have to take all the tests. And people are like, well, why would they not want to? Why would you not want them to take the tests? Um, Obviously, that would show that they're actually learning something, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, but here's the thing: if you've got this outcome here, and you have to aim towards it, and it's the same outcome that you had to do in the other system, you kind of have to do the same things to actually get there and achieve it, right? So you need to redefine what it is you want kids to be able to do if you
yeah,
want to have a different outcome, like happier kids that actually do still learn and so forth. And I went with a private school. Now, what happened there was brilliant despite all of that. Maybe financially it wasn't the best time, and it didn't last that long, but the results were incredible. We did a structured type of, we did the Lightway system. I'm not even going to say unschooling anymore. And so in the morning it was some physical exercise, a yoga. There was some mindfulness practice, which back then in 2009, if you said meditation, it was the devil's work. Now you can say meditation, but you had to say mindfulness. I mean, this is like how things have changed so
Yeah.
rapidly, right? And and then in the morning we'd sit in our circle and have a discussion, about whatever they wanted to talk about, but also about what they wanted to learn about, what was going on, how things were going, and come up with like a topic. What
Mm-hmm.
do they all say that they would like to learn about? And then I would co-create with them how we were going to learn about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the afternoon, it was what was called bee time. And bee time was beautiful. That was just, the classic follow your passions, follow your
Mm-hmm.
instinct, be outside playing if you want, sit and read if you want. And also, they would give each other classes. And that was so fun. And talk about
Oh,
build literacy without having to force anything. So there was a big board, and they would take a sheet, and on it said what the name of the class was, and then where and what time and what they'd be doing. And it was a mixed age class, which I love. The single
I
age environment is so dysfunctional. I mean, I think that's what leads to bullying, right? It's
oh,
another
oh,
dysfunctional part of the system, massively.
absolutely. Well, and I think we'll digress for just a second.
Yeah.
I was just talking to my sister about this very thing because the other thing that has happened is I feel like it's led to more, as Dr. Gordon Neufeld says in Hold On to Your Kids, more peer orientation,
Hmm.
where it becomes an unhealthy attachment to people of the same age as opposed to the parent figures where it's supposed to be. But also back in the day when they still had one room schoolhouses, um, the older kids would help the younger kids, and then the younger kids, like there's a natural mentoring that happened, and we've lost that. Anyway, so I digress. Yeah, I think
No, that's okay. Let's go a little into that. I think that's a
no,
really important point.
no, I just think that the same age class has brought about so many problems, and I think bullying is just one of
Mhm.
those things.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that there's in enrichment programs where that my children have been involved in, where there's multi-age, there is less bullying. Um, in my experience, which is, still fairly limited. But I also love watching the older kids really in the multi-age situations where they blossom because they have to help those that are younger than them, and it instills more learning in them. So anyway,
That's
that's
exactly it. That's exactly it. And the other thing is, going back to when I was doing my research years, right, and going to these conferences, I kept meeting all these children that had been in these, I guess, free to learn spaces that were multi age, and that over reliance on the kids their own age, and that transference of, I guess, guidance from, wiser adults. Not that they're all wiser, I'm not ageist
right.
in that way, but that didn't happen. It
Mhm.
doesn't happen. There's no, like, none of that estrangement that we see. Like, it's almost expected in our culture now that young people, by the time they're teenagers, are going to turn their backs on their parents. They're not going to listen to them. They're going to become rebels. They're going to drink until they throw up. And that's like a rite of passage in some
Right.
cultures, right, in the Western world. And that, yeah, that you're going to lose that connection for those years, but they'll come back eventually in their 20s or 30s. Well, for children who are not segregated like that, that
Right.
does not happen. And
It's
the
true.
conversations between them and the adults are rich, respectful, and completely different. Like that just doesn't happen. And they stay connected with their parents. And I think we're seeing that in home education, that
Hmm.
parents have that greater connection, especially when they don't do the school at home, right? When they
Right.
do
Right.
the more self-directed learning that completely honors their children's own rhythms.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, my teenage daughter just got on Instagram for the first time, and that was all. She's like, I just don't want to do social media, and finally, she's like, I think I'm going to sign up for an Instagram account. So she sends me this reel this morning, and it was like this girl dancing, and she's like, most kids, most teenagers are ashamed of their parents, and I'm here like, me and my mom are besties, and I was like, oh. because it's true. Like,
Oh,
I love
yeah.
talking to her. She loves talking to me. And we don't have that, like, her becoming that rebellious teenager. And I think that's become a myth in our society, to that that is how it should be,
Mm,
when historically that's not how it has been. That's a
yeah.
very recent phenomenon in the last 80 years.
It is, and it's not
So,
even in all cultures, right?
no. Mm-mm.
Not at
No.
all.
No.
Not at all. It's mostly, I guess, white Western cultures.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's just white, but definitely
Uh, I,
Western Anglophone, not Anglophone.
I
That's
think that would
Anglophone.
be fair. No, I think it'd be fair. I think it would be
Yeah,
fair to say.
yeah, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit back about, because we digressed for a second
Yeah.
about the classes that they would teach, and they go and they get
Oh,
those.
oh my God! Like there was one
I
kid.
love that.
He taught a class on splodge monsters.
What are
Splodge
splodge
monsters. It
monsters?
was an art class, and it was just like, yeah, and he'd got all the stuff out ready, papers, the paper, the paint and straws, and it was really just kind of making, it was almost like straw painting really, but then with
Oh,
paintbrushes as well and just whatever, and then you would glue things together. It was an art class. What else? There was another one where it was a sewing class. One of the kids was really into that, and she offered a sewing class. And, we're going back a long time here. Those are the two I remember. But I think what was just so cool was them just taking agency of this, and they loved it. Oh, and how we got into the age thing is because the older kids that knew how to read and write already would help the younger kids fill out the form,
hmm.
right? And do that kind of stuff. So that's again where this multi-age thing comes in, is that eventually the younger kids will get tired of having to have someone else do it for them, and
Yeah.
then they'll want to start doing it. That was also interesting. Is I had two students who came from a Waldorf background, and they were
Hmm.
7. And in Waldorf, there's absolutely zero academics whatsoever, right? Up until 7.
Hmm.
And I think that's beautiful.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, right, so one was a boy and one was a girl, and they came in, and within 6 weeks, the little boy started reading. And
Hmm.
I wasn't giving like actual reading classes. We were doing much more organic types of learning, right?
Hmm.
But he wanted to. So I said, okay, all right. And so we sat and I just started helping him. He would say, what's that word? And I would read it to him and he'd be like, okay. And he just was like picking it up just like this, just like this, just like this. And then some of the older kids would sit with him too and read and help him. And then I remember the day the mother of the little girl came in and saw him reading, and she said, "Oh, how did you do that?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't really. He just wanted to, so we encouraged him and just kind of told him what the words are." She's like, "Well, I want my daughter to do that too." And I said, "Well," said, "here's the thing: is he really chose to do it, so he learned it like that. She hasn't shown an interest yet, but if she
Yeah.
does, we'll do the same thing for her."
Yeah.
you know and I hear that over and over again. I see it over and over again. And I always feel sad because I'm in quite a lot of home education Facebook groups, and there's so many parents angsting about, oh, my kid's 7 and they're behind on reading or they're behind on
Hmm.
math, and oh, what method should I start using? I'm really worried that, and it goes
Right.
on and on. And it's just so unnecessary. I feel for them because I know where they're coming from, because I was deeply in that system of learning, and I used to think in similar ways. But once you experience this other way, but actually meet the children and talk to them, like for example, I was randomly in a cave in Australia a couple of years ago, and this probably about 13-year-old girl came up to me and just started talking to me. And within a minute, I'm like, oh, she's home educated. This is obvious. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that, and I said to her, are you at homeschool? She goes, oh no, I go to school. And I was like, oh, that's
Oh, it's
weird. Yeah. Well, then her mother shows up, obviously thinking, who's this strange woman talking to my daughter in this dark cave? And I said similar to her, I said, wow, your daughter's amazing. said, but I'm so surprised she's at school. She goes, oh, she just started school this year. She's never been to school before.
You're like, okay, okay. It makes sense
Right?
now. Right,
Now it
right.
makes sense. But there's a qualitative difference, a qualitative difference. And when people say, oh, yeah, the school system's broken, but my local school's great because it's wonderful teachers and so on, I'm like, yes, your local school might be actually a really good, well functioning, well staffed example of the system that currently exists. But the
It's still
system
this
that currently
system.
exists is so limiting in
Mhm.
the way that it allows our children to explore knowledge, to explore themselves, to know themselves, and to go into their passions, that it cannot deliver what we want for our kids, right? And what do we want for our
Yeah.
kids? We want them to be happy. We want them to thrive. We want them to have the freedom to go and become experts at what they love and and are passionate about. And we want them to enjoy their childhood at the same time, right? And then have a good life. And that
Well,
system doesn't deliver.
no. Well, and I look at it and I want my kids to fail and fail and fail again and again and again and retry. And I say that in all seriousness, like when my son was learning to make sourdough and the first loaf didn't turn out the way he had wanted to.
Mm.
Um, I wasn't like, well, you got an F on that. It was like, oh, well, what do you need to do to what do you think happened there? And he's like, I didn't let it
Mm.
rise long enough, and I think I overcooked it, and also I
Right.
probably need to do this. But that he was okay with the failure, like it wasn't an end all be all, because in home education you're allowed to fail and figure things out and do better next time. Whereas the system, you get um you you get punished for failing. You get an F, and I'm
Yes.
sorry, and then you get labeled, and then and it stays with you through the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Most public school educated children leave school with a sense of not who they are on the inside and what their passions are, but I'm a C student in this and I'm an A student in that
yeah.
and I fail at this and then they really judge themselves by those grades. And
Hmm.
what you just brought up is really important too, because of course, having been through the different systems, right, that where all the
Hmm.
grading systems are different, it's actually really damaging what we're doing with giving grades. And it speaks exactly to what you just mentioned. So, for example, in the UK, 75 and above is an A,
Hmm.
right? In the US, 90 and above is an A, and sometimes it's a bit higher. I don't know, but that seems to be the general thing.
Yeah.
In France, the kids are ecstatic if they get it's out of 20, and they're ecstatic if they get 12 out of 20. That means you've done really well, which is just over
Wow.
50%, right? Yes.
Right.
Okay. So, what does that lead to? Well, what I noticed going from especially the UK to the US system is the US system has to simplify. It has to simplify everything down to those lower levels of questioning, like,
Hmm.
come on, remind me, where are we? So there's recognizing the right answer, and you know
Oh,
what
like
I'm talking
multiple
about.
choice testing and that type of thing.
Yes, well, yeah, and not going into synthesis and analysis, just staying at those lower levels of thinking, right?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And you
Okay.
have to do that in America because if you didn't, and you the children end up all failing, right? Because to go to that, like with your son experimenting with the bread and go into analysis and thing, you have to be able to fail. You have to
Right.
be able to kind of get it wrong and work your way through and explore. And you can't do that and still pass.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. No,
Because
you
that's not
fail.
how,
It's
yeah.
not how the system is set up.
That's right. And the thing is that humans naturally learn that way through experimentation.
Right.
And they're not going to get 90+% of it exactly the first time within a few days of this new topic. But then, then we get into this curriculum that goes a million miles an hour in the US and has no depth at all. So, an example of this simply is in the UK, for example. And I'm not saying that's great, but it's somewhat better when you only have to get 75 or above, or you can pass at 40 and above is a D, something like that. then when you get these deeper questions on exams and things, you can miss more and still do okay. But the thing is it
Interesting.
gives the opportunity. So I remember the shock I felt in my first US university history course when we were having a review session in class. And one student put their hand, I was ready, right? Fresh out of it, ready with all my questions. I'd reviewed all the subject, all our notes and everything. And I was really into it. And I had all my questions, but they were all about the content and getting deeper with the content to make sure I understood. The rest of the kids in the class who were all American, putting their hands up saying, will this be on the test? Will
Yeah.
that be on the test? Will the chart on page 65 be on the test? And I was like, when the student asked that, I just sat there and I just laughed. I thought, no, she's never going to tell them that. Are you kidding me? But she did.
Of course you will.
And
Yeah.
I went, I'm in a totally different world, because in the UK, if it's in the book anywhere, whether you discussed it or not, it could show up, and whether you discussed it or not. And they would ask you questions that were about what you'd learned, but doing it in a different way, and you would have to manipulate the data and synthesize and analyze during it, right? But regardless, none of that grading is a good idea for the other reasons that you said. But I want to emphasize how punitive and impossible actually the standards are in America. And that's why the kids, and it's being dumbed down, because the teachers are also under a lot of pressure to actually pass children through that system, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if they're special ed. The number of kids that are special ed, parents think that's great. Now they've got their 504, I think it is, and blah, blah, and they're getting all of these accommodations and things. Yeah, that's good. And those kinds of things need to be in place. However, when teachers have 150 to 180 students, how much do you think they're really able to do that with 2 or 3 lesson plans a day? I mean, you're planning an hour and a half of good instruction 3 times a week for 150 to 180 students, and 60 of them might have special and different accommodations. No, you know what happens when special ed kids don't do their work? Absolutely nothing. They get a 70 and on they go.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and then what happens to those kids is then they go, I must be stupid. I must be dumb because I'm not getting this.
Yeah.
And they label themselves. Well, I think that's the thing with testing and grades is I know that they were meant to be a data point, but they've become the end all. They've become the end goal as opposed to learning become the end goal.
Yeah.
And I started thinking after we started homeschooling, I started realizing, wait a minute, my kids, we'd have deep conversations about things that we'd read. And I thought, when I was in school, I don't remember ever having this deep of conversations. Usually what the things that were on the test, as you mentioned, were very surface level things. And I realized, like, oh, if I were testing the kids, would I miss all the things that the other things that they were learning that I wouldn't have guessed that they were learning, because I was expecting them to do, these things and learn these things. And instead they glean all these other wonderful ideas, and which I learned through just conversation. So anyway.
That's a huge part of the learning, and how you know that children are learning, right, is having conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what parents that home educate in this freer way actually find out. Once they untie themselves from, they must know this and this, and then they allow it to go deeper. Yeah, the conversations go through the roof, and you suddenly realize how intelligent these kids really are, which, NASA did that study, right, with the kindergartners, and found out that 85% of them tested as geniuses, but the longer time they spent in school over the years, the less genius they became. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that tells us something, right?
Right. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so after you did the school, because you did the school, it hit in 2008.
Yes.
Did you shut it down? What happened? What happened next?
Well, what happened next is I spent a long time thinking about things.
I love it.
Wondering. Yeah. Well, my goal originally, it was called Lightway Schools, because I had this plan of having these kinds of schools all over the world, right? And at least all over America. But what I found out is it's actually a very slow pathway, opening a school. And then
Mhm.
there's this thing called founder syndrome as well, where if a founder leaves that school and moves on, then it might not continue that way and so forth. Anyway, I started looking for another pathway.
Hmm.
And I suddenly noticed this was back in 2013, and I should have acted on it then. But the amount of the way that home education was building. And I thought, okay, I found out when I was in the system that changing it is so, so hard.
Yeah, it's
And
not happening.
no, it's not. It's this behemoth. It's a truck. It's an 18 wheeler that just cannot change course, and so so I didn't want to change in the system. Starting all these schools didn't seem like really what I wanted to do anymore. And then I saw home education picking up. I thought, oh, these parents are outside the system. Obviously, they're doing that because they want something different for their kids. But do they actually know how? Do they feel confident? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have even the parenting skills necessary to manage this? And I see quite a few really do struggle
Hmm.
with some parenting things, especially around having boundaries and communication,
Yeah.
right, which is the core of how you create that connection with your children. So I wanted to create pathways for parents that were kind of similar to what teachers go through, but with totally different outcomes and a totally different kind of formation. I don't know why all these French words keep coming to me right now. Totally different framework, training, learning framework. Uh, and that's where the idea came to me. Well, what if there was some kind of certification that parents could get as well as home educators or home education designers, where they get the tools to really think into, to really understand
Hmm.
not just what to do, but why you're doing it. Because I'm noticing still, it's amazing how many people, how many home educators are saying, hey, I get this negative feedback from this person and this negative feedback from this. And there's still so many people out there that don't understand
Yeah.
what we understand, what we've been talking about, right? About the system, and think that anything outside of that, if you don't get your curriculum and do it at home,
Yeah.
then you're really doing a disservice to your children. But actually it's the opposite, right?
Right.
You're freeing them to become all that they can be. Let's borrow that from the army, shall
Well, I've even seen, I'm going to say influencers, and I'm going to use that term very loosely, um, in the home education space who are like, if you don't do it this way, if you don't do, strict testing and strict this and strict that, the classical way or this way or that way, then you're doing it wrong. And I think, wow, you are doing a disservice
we?
to all of these parents who don't want to do it that way and who don't want to do the school at home. Thank you very
Right.
much. You know what I mean? Because
That's right. Yeah.
um I believe there is a better
Yeah.
way to approach children and approach education as we've been
Yeah, I
talking
agree with
about.
you. And I have to say, though, I think I'm as guilty, but in the opposite direction. Because when I see that and I hear all this school at home and which curriculum should I get for math and which should I do for this and that, I just feel deeply saddened because I know what they don't know, they don't even know,
Yeah.
right? About all of that. Um, However, I don't know what you think. I'm interested.
Yeah, let's talk.
I feel like more and more parents are actually getting to that place and coming into, I don't want to do it that way. I don't like doing it that way. And I don't like trying to force my kids to do all of this. And I think there's a rising tide now. I think the
Mhm.
dam is about to break and people are going
Uh
to move solidly into it.
yeah, no, I think it's absolutely breaking. And well, and even for those parents that are like, I want to home educate, um but I but their personalities are naturally inclined to have something very, very, very structured like
Mm,
curriculums,
yeah,
that I think, yeah, I'm not anti-curriculum because I think that there is a
right.
place for it in some cases. Like I use curriculum, granted it's from the 1800s, for reading, writing, and math,
Yeah.
arithmetic, and the maths, I guess I should say. I get corrected all the time.
Math.
Maths, arithmetics, and maths. Um, and so I think
Okay.
there's a place for structure, right? There's a place for structure, there's a
Yeah.
place for curriculum.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do see more parents going, wow, I saw what grades did to me growing up, and I don't want my kids to
Mm,
experience the same thing.
yeah.
Um, I saw how much anxiety I would feel on with testing. Is there a better way to learn if a child is doing something? And I think that the dam is breaking.
Yeah.
Um, I just heard, and I don't know if this is accurate, so nobody quote me on this, but I had just heard recently that like 10,000 families in the state of Colorado left to home educate this last year. I have not verified to see if that's actually true. That's just what somebody had told me, but I'm like, if that is true,
Yeah.
that's a lot of
That's
families.
a lot. I wouldn't doubt it because like I say, I'm on Facebook groups every day trying
Mm-hmm.
to help folks, and every single day there's more and more and more and more. Like I've just pulled
Yeah.
my kids from school. It's every day.
Yeah,
Like,
well, and I even think about the messages that I get, being a transition, I'm a transitioning type podcast.
mm,
And
yeah.
I get emails, I get messages via Facebook and Instagram. And I mean, they're just coming in all the time. And I have a hard time keeping up with the amount that I'm getting of people
And
going,
is it parents saying, yeah,
"Mhm,
what are they saying?
I want to leave. I want to leave the system. I want to leave." Or even friends going, "Okay, I've been watching you guys. How do I do this? We're
Yeah.
done. We're done. I'm done with the bullying. I'm done with this. I'm done with this. I'm done with the anxiety. I'm done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm seeing it personally, but
Yeah.
then if we look at the numbers, if those numbers are accurate, which I don't know if they are, the numbers are showing the dam is breaking. So
Well, it is. And I'm just glad there's more and more people like you and I that are here ready to help them, right?
yeah,
As they step out, hold their hands. And you know what you said about your friends now seeing what you're doing. That's what happened to my friend Patty, who called me actually right back in 2013 when I started doing all of this. And she said, I want to pull my kids. I don't know what to do. Da, da, da. And I actually went from Asheville to Chicago and did a couple of workshops for her and her friends. But her friends decided to keep their kids in school. They couldn't quite get over that fear.
yeah,
And but she went ahead and did it. And both of her kids ended up with there was nothing to worry about. They both ended up with bloody 2-year degrees by the time they were 16, 17, because they followed their passions into it, not because they were forced to.
yeah, yeah,
And they were happy and thriving, and there was no anxiety, there was no bullying, there was none of that. And then her friends were, and this makes me sad to this day, right? Is that were so sad because they left their kids in and they saw the difference, but it was too late by then.
yeah,
And those kids were anxious and unhappy and definitely didn't have 2-year degrees. They were struggling just to graduate high school. And the problem is there's no meaning behind it other than
yeah.
getting the grade, right?
Right.
Like you, every year you'd say, well, why do I have to learn this? They're in third grade, say, and they say, oh, so you'll be ready for fourth grade. And then in fourth grade, oh, so you'll be ready for fifth grade. And then, oh, so you'll be ready for middle school, so you'll be ready for high school, so you'll be ready, can get to college, so you can get a job, right? Which these days, let's face it, is not guaranteed. This
Right.
is,
Right.
universities are in deep trouble at this
Yeah.
point because
Well,
they're not delivering what people need anymore.
Well, and I see kids leaving high school, and I know because um my kids who started homeschooling 5.5 years ago, I had one just graduate last year and one that's graduating this
Mm,
year, but she's been doing concurrent enrollment, so she's just
yeah.
keeping going. But when I talk to their friends, or I talk to my older son's friends, and they get into college and they're just kind of floundering, and they're like, "Oh, I'm learning to budget. Oh, I just learned how to do my laundry. Oh, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do and what I want to be." And these are affluent kids who are smart kids. Um, and it's been a travesty, especially the ones that are like, I'm in school and I have no idea what I want to do.
Mm,
And I've had no time to really think about it. So I guess I'll just do this. And to me,
yeah.
that's a travesty. But even with my daughter, she brought this up. She's been doing concurrent enrollment for the last couple of years. through the local state college. And
Mm.
she brought up even, she's like, Mom, okay, so I wish there was a university where I could take the classes that I was interested in and call it good. I'm like, well, I mean, you could do that now. She's like, yeah, but I can't leave with a degree. I have to take the prescribed classes that they give me for general education requirements, or else I don't get the piece of paper. She's like, but really what I'm more interested in is the knowledge for the knowledge's sake, like because I want to learn how to oil paint, because I want
Yeah.
to learn, she's like, I don't understand why I have to take college level algebra when I know that I want to do something in this field,
Yeah.
and I've already learned financial literacy. So I'm not, I'm like, you bring up and ask very fair questions. Those are legitimately fair questions.
Yeah,
So.
and just so that you can tell her, there are universities now that are offering the create your own degree program. One of them is actually in
Ooh,
Colorado. What's it called? Starts with an N, and this was
I don't
10 years
know.
ago. Not Narara. That's an eco village in Australia. It's called Naropa, I think, or
Okay,
something
I'm gonna
like
have to
that.
look it up because I've
Yeah.
never even heard of
But that's
this.
actually the direction more and more of them are going in. In fact, I recently even saw a program for an MBA
Hmm.
where you got a mentor, and actually the whole MBA was you being an entrepreneur and starting your own business, and you could even go through them and maybe get funding and stuff, right? This is where
That's
tertiary
brilliant.
education is going,
Hmm.
and the universities that don't do that are failing
Yeah.
now because I mean, come on. The kids these days, in some ways, are more sophisticated in their understanding of the world because they've been exposed to it so much more online. They know what's going on. They know that jobs are going out, and so many of them didn't want to come back to the workforce after lockdowns and everything, right? Probably why? Probably a lot of them went online, became entrepreneurs, did their own thing, realized that what they were doing was kind of meaningless to them, and they couldn't go back to it.
Yeah.
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 And not just young people, but lots of people have not
Oh,
wanted to go back to doing those meaningless things. But you can't do something meaningful and purposeful that fills you if you don't even know who you are. So
right.
even that question of, I don't know what I want to do, is a result of, I think, a skewed system that focuses on you thinking about what you want to do rather than just focusing on who am I, and then what you want to do when you know who you are because you're doing the things that you're drawn to. That becomes clear on its own. You don't have to
Yeah.
sit there and go, oh, what do I want to do, because you're already doing it,
Yeah.
because that's where you're naturally inclined to go, right?
Well, and I think the better question that we'd have to ask ourselves is, who do I want to become?
Yeah,
Like, who
that
do I want to
too.
become? And
Yeah,
then, and let that steer us, not
yeah.
just what do I want to do? Well, what do I like to do now? And how,
Yeah,
um,
totally.
so, so where is lightway learning right now?
Right
Um,
now. So
yeah.
right now we've just finished really putting our whole offering together, because what I saw was, I looked at the landscape of what's available,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of really good resource now, right? And really good support. There's coaching, and there's even some little courses out there, and there's some communities, there's Facebook groups and so on. But what I wanted to do was take the hand of that parent who's just stepping out now, has no background in education, and is scared to death, right? At least initially, this is who I want to help. And take their hand and say, okay, well, look, here, come on in. There's this community right here.
Hmm.
We've got some coaching for you as well. We're going to give you an accountability partner, and I have a whole course that you can take with us supporting you through it. So, in this whole ecosystem, right, there's a whole system of support. And I've put the Lightway system into that, is what we teach. And it's like unschooling, but with a little bit more structure, a bit more like what we were doing at my school, right?
Yeah.
Where you'll have, going back to what I called family, FAMLI, with the circles and everything. There's a spark circle. There's only 3 circles in it. Spark circle is where you sit and share about learning, right? And the parents do that as well.
Mm.
Right? So what are you learning about? And you can kind of share and spark off ideas. Okay? So it's guiding gosh, I'm so deep into it. I just start talking about and going in all
No, I love
directions.
it. I love it. I love it.
But yeah, so we teach that in the course, how to do that spark circle and heart circle. And then wisdom circle is the one where you would co-create all the family agreements, the rules per se that we talked about, like they do in the other schools. And so there's a whole methodology around that that comes from my training in sociocracy, which is nobody can ever say it. That's why I like family better. I've distilled it into just these three circles that will help build family harmony and connection. So that's a piece that is outside of that unschooling model, right? That kind of completes it for families that are home, and it gives them a framework to get started
Yeah.
with building those relationships.
I love that.
And so the course has like modules. It's literally just here's what you don't do right now, here's what you do right now, here's something you can get started with family, which I think we start them off with just a simple heart circle of sharing. You're decompressing from all that schooling, and you're gonna start to unload that stress, you and the kids, in a safe space, a container that will teach you how to create. um, and then what it is to parent as a home educator, right? So building your parenting skills at the same time, and the pièce de résistance as well for this open-ended learning is always the question of, well, how do I know they're learning, and how do I show people they're learning, and how do I appease my relatives that think I've lost it, and all of that,
Right.
right? So we've partnered with Prism, which is an amazing app that does. I mean, I literally sat down last January and said, I think there needs to be an app.
I love
And
it.
I worked with ChatGPT, and I said, okay, if this is my audience, what would this app need to be able to do? And I had my list already, and it said all of these. And okay, yep, that as well. That makes sense. And I created this list, and I put it in my Google Drive, thinking in 2 or 3 years, we'll be able to afford to have somebody to build this for us. Well, little did I know that starting that very month, someone else started building it. And so now,
No
yes, now
kidding.
it exists, and it will create. So imagine this: you're out, you're doing this organic learning journey, or even you're at home and you're doing something like, oh, I wish I could capture that. You just open your phone, take a picture, or just write a description of what they're doing. This app will pull in all kinds of learning insights, which are kind of like learning objectives, but that map things in a way that will make sense to you, to your family, to your regulators. Um, it's on the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and academic kind of learning things. What's actually going. It's amazing what it brings up, things you would never think about. Once you've got enough entries, it will then create. You can do what's called strewing. I don't know why it's called strewing, but basically you say, okay, look at all the entries from this date to this date and give me ideas, right? And it will come up with all these ideas of learning extensions and local resources like museums or classes or anything else in your area that these kids could do. And there you've got that. And it will create transcripts for high school, for college. It will create, I mean, it goes on. But this app is like, it's included in our bundle, and parents get like 90 days. Usually
Oh,
it's
wow.
30 days to try it, but when they join us, they get 90 days to have it
Wow.
for free. And the reason I negotiated that was I felt like, originally this was created for the micro schools where it's trained educators using it
Yeah.
with groups of kids. And so I told the founder, I said, hey, these parents are coming in with no experience. They need more time just to regulate, to kind of start grounding into they're actually doing something,
Yeah.
and to experiment with it before, they might be, before we actually, they just need more of a longer time for a free trial to get used to it. And
Yeah.
so he agreed to that. So, but that's pretty much exclusive to us at this point.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So that's really exciting. So when I put all that together, it's just a really solid offering of support. And here's my little dog I'm looking after. Yes, we used to be. Oh,
She's
good.
beautiful.
She is beautiful. Oh. So yeah, so it's a course, the community, live group coaching, it's learning family, it's learning parenting as well as teaching and learning, and then it's got the app on top of it. And also that accountability thing. Because the thing with online courses that I learned is 80% of the time people don't complete them,
Yeah.
right? That's
I'm
huge.
guilty. Guilty.
Yeah, I've done it, right? So I was like, well, how can we increase that rate? Because I don't want people to come in, take this course, and stop after, life happens and so on. So the monthly coaching calls are part of it. And within that, each month we give you time. You go, you have a breakout room and you meet with an accountability partner that keeps you going. But plus, with being in the community at the same time with other people taking it, you can ask questions, and it's all just a way to keep everybody engaged. Okay, Tippy, in a minute.
I love that.
Right? I want people to finish it, because when they do, they'll be in a really good place. They're going to not only have confidence in themselves, but confidence explaining this to other people. Because with Maya, my co-founder's experience with education and learning, right, we know the whys of everything as well, and we want parents to feel empowered in that way. And that's why at the beginning I said it's kind of like teacher ed, but it's really soft, but
Yeah.
still it's real knowledge about how and why children need to learn in this way, why it works. And
Yeah.
once you can explain these things and be knowledgeable, and then on top of that say, well, if they say, well, you're not a teacher, are you? Well, no, but I'm a certified home educator now,
And
right?
then they have that backing that they can use with
And then
their.
they have that backing that they can use. Yeah. So
I love that.
that's where we're at. We're launching. It's launching. It's live.
Yay!
Just go to the
Congratulations.
website. You find it. There's a
Which,
link I think I put
if
in the
they
bio.
where could they find you? Like where? Because I'll put your links in the show notes.
Yeah,
What? Where's the
I'm
best way
also
to
on
find you?
face. I'm also on Facebook, Zara Lightway. You can just message me directly, or email me, and I put the email. I gave you the email. Is love@lightwaylearning.earth. One of our values is being love in action, and but it's love in action and know thyself are two of our values, which goes back to what we were saying. It's
Yeah.
about the kids knowing themselves, about us knowing ourselves, about who we're becoming, right?
Yeah. I love that.
So the whole thing's really infused with those values and
So
real
fun.
conscious parenting and conscious learning, and just like, yeah, building that awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. I hope it's really going to help people.
I'm
I think so.
excited.
I
I
think
think
what
it's
we put
wonderful.
together is going to be quite helpful and
Very cool.
complementary to what other people are offering as well, which
Very cool.
there's millions of parents now. They need everything we've all got
It's
to
true.
help,
And the
right?
more that people, it's true. It's true. Whether people are doing micro schools or homeschooling, we have to be a community and we need each other's help. I mean,
That's
that's
right.
just the reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's the last bit of advice that you'd give? Actually, before I ask that question,
Yeah.
what's one thing that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't ask you today?
Oh, Lord, put me on the spot.
Yeah,
What do
I
I
know.
wish you'd
That's
asked
a
me
very deep,
that you
loaded
didn't ask
question there.
me? Okay, let me think. Hmm. I actually don't have anything.
Okay.
Nothing's coming to mind at all.
Okay.
What would I wish? It might come to me later.
That's a story of my life.
I mean, I could literally talk about all the topics we've talked about for probably hours for each one, right? Like,
Yeah, same, same.
actually, no, I've got one. I wish you'd asked me how the conversation with the superintendent of schools in Durango, Colorado went.
Oh, yeah. How did that go?
Okay. So when I got to Colorado, so I moved to Colorado after I closed my school. And when I got there, I ended up leaning into the idea of maybe I would try again, do another school, because there were quite a few people that wanted one, right?
Yeah.
And when they got to know me, they're like, could you help? So during that process, I visited a lot of schools there, all the local schools, and got to see what was happening in Colorado, and ended up sitting down with the superintendent of schools. And he said, I explained all that we've just talked about and all the thinking behind it and all of that. And he looked at me and he goes, Zara? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, I'm the devil to you. I'm like, oh, really? Tell me more. He goes, yeah, I think the testing's fantastic.
Okay.
And I was like, really? I was so excited. I was like, fantastic, because I really want to hear why. Because
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, I cannot fathom why, after seeing the results of the testing and the stress and the anxiety
Yeah.
and everything, right? How can anybody think this is good for these kids? I didn't say it to him quite like that, but I just was like, okay, good,
Yeah. Yeah.
right,
I love
tell
that you
me.
were curious though. Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, I love that. I love that.
Wow. I was just like flummoxed, because I'll tell you where that came from, is because having been inside that system, nobody in there is out to hurt children.
Right.
This is not the goal, right? So they must think it's good for them somehow. Here's what he shared with me. He said, well, I'm a bit of a scientist,
Okay.
and what I believe is that with I might need to explain a little bit how the testing is done. So let's just back up a bit. So basically, the kids take the tests all the time, constantly. Last school I was in, it was every 3 weeks they were testing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, fifth and sixth grade. And then the teachers take the data, which is based on each separate learning objective. Like a learning objective might be adding 2-digit numbers, right, in math. And they look at all the objectives that were tested for that 3 weeks. And then they figure out which objectives the children are failing.
Mm.
And then the children are pulled out. So all the children that failed objective 6.22 or whatever it is get pulled out into a class with a separate teacher. And they might miss their elective to do this, by the way. And then that person tries to teach them that one objective, right?
Okay.
Okay. And
Okay.
this is done over and over. And this
Yeah.
is what they're
Throughout the
doing
whole year. Gotcha. Yeah.
throughout the whole year. It's intense. Well, his take on that was that by doing that, we're figuring out exactly how to make sure every child can succeed at learning all of the objectives. And once we do that enough, we'll have the information we need to plug all the gaps, and we'll have this perfect system where all the children will know everything that they're supposed to know, right? And we'll have 100% of children on track with this.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
just sat there and I was like, I thought, okay, I can see the thinking behind this,
Mm-hmm.
but the reality, which this person should know, is that is not how human beings learn at all,
No.
right? The brain starts to create a pattern, a schema, it's called in psychology, of it's like a story about the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And any new knowledge that's going to be meaningful or lasting gets inserted into the schema. And that creates our view of the world and our knowledge structure and our body of knowledge, and partly who we are and how we see the world. So when you start doing what he's describing, the knowledge doesn't stick, it doesn't last, and they struggle because it doesn't fit anywhere. And not only does it not fit into a schema because it's not part of a schema, it's just isolated facts
Yeah.
and skills, they can't learn it properly. And
Yeah.
every summer they forget it anyway, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I just sat there flummoxed.
Yeah.
I was just like, I was shocked actually, and quite saddened, because it also made it sound
Like
that
they're
might
cattle.
work if children were robots, right?
Right. Right.
Robots.
But
But that's what it's for. It wasn't ever built to create, as you tell so beautifully in your on your Instagram channel, right? The system wasn't built to create critical thinkers and happy, thriving human beings. It was created to reduce us down to factory workers who just do,
mm-hmm. Yep.
right? So if that's the outcome you want, everyone being exactly the same, then,
Well,
but it's
and
not even succeeding at doing that, Janae. That's the problem as well,
oh
right?
no, it's failing miserably. And
Mm.
when as you were saying that, I thought three things. Number one, so they test so they can figure out where the gaps are, right? That's what he said.
Yes.
And yesterday, as I sat down one on one with my 10-year-old, and we were talking about sentence structure and how sentences work and going over types of sentences, I could see as I was working with her one on one as a mom where the gaps were. I didn't have to test her. I could see
No.
it, especially when she's like, I don't understand this thing. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good question. This, let's try it out. Again, we were working on
Mm.
sentences, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, when you're writing, okay, and specifically she's in fourth grade, but she struggles with capitalizing the first letter in the sentence, right? And we've struggled with this,
Mm,
but we're really diving into sentence structure this year. And yesterday it clicked, and I kept saying, no, it's important that you capitalize it, but for some reason, it doesn't matter how many times we've talked about it, it clicked yesterday. I know she's been struggling with that because I've been working with her one
mm-hmm,
on one, and I didn't need to
mm-hmm.
test her on it. Like I already
Yeah,
knew that. I knew that through conversation. I knew that through sitting with
yeah,
her as the mom, and I didn't have to test her. That's the first thing I thought. Second thing I thought
yeah,
was, what are they preparing them for? That they won't have gaps in their education. But as Peter Gray says, the world is so full of information that nobody can even learn a slice in a lifetime. Why do we all have to learn the same slice? You know,
exactly.
and they're
Yeah.
gonna go, like, there's no way we can learn everything there is to know before we die. Like, I mean, we're not capable of learning all that there is to learn. We're one person, each individually. That was the second thing. And the
Well,
third thing
that's
I thought was that if you're trying to prepare them for the future, then a couple things on that. Number one, we don't even know what the future is going to look like in 5 years from now. We don't know what the job market's going to look like. We don't know what's going to be working and what's not going to be working, and what new innovations are going to happen.
yeah, yeah.
How do you
Mhm.
prepare for a future that we still don't know what it's going to look like? Number one. And number two, um, they're coming out of school not prepared. They're coming out of school not knowing how to do their laundry. They're coming out of school not knowing basic finances, and they're not knowing basic things like, how do you change a tire? What do you, what is
Mhm.
insurance, and how does insurance work? Like, so to say that they're going to have gaps, yeah, well, they do. And it's not gaps on the slope intercept formula. You know what I mean? Like,
Much as I enjoy doing those
yeah,
things.
as
Yeah,
much
you're
as
right.
great
Yeah.
as the slope intercept formula is,
Yeah.
um, there are other gaps. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well,
So
you're quite right. And the gaps are the sad thing is because what we just talked about and all that testing and what he said, right? Because it doesn't match how human beings actually learn.
yeah,
The gaps are even in the knowledge that the system is trying to force into these brains. The brains are saying, I don't care about this. I don't want to learn it. And we wonder why they struggle. But it's not even succeeding at that. How many of them actually know beyond the day that they took a test?
no, they don't.
Actually retain the information. We've all been there, right? You cram for the test, and then the half an hour after you've taken it, you might not even be able to pass it again. That can happen,
Right.
right? But the other thing, what you said that sparked for me is, yeah, they're focusing on finding the gaps, finding the gaps. Another way to look at that is they're constantly looking at what our children are not very good at and making them do more of it.
Yeah. Instead of
And then we
going,
wonder,
what are
well,
your strengths?
what are your strengths? Yeah. A child in my school, the one that did the class on Splodge Monsters, he arrived and he was a little quirky,
Mhm.
which I think I said. No, that was a different one. All right. And he was 9. Janae, I kid you not, it quickly came to my attention that when it came to math, if I said, what's 2 plus 3, for example, and I said, okay, he would struggle. And then I said, well, use your fingers. He couldn't even do that. He couldn't even go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It just wasn't there for this child. His brain didn't function that way. It was really clear. Inside that system, but it was a private school, but it's still the same system.
Mhm.
Inside it, they were making him the previous year, at 9 years old, he'd have been 8, do 2 hours a day after school of math worksheets, like trying to like take a drill, make a hole in his head and pour it in, and that was going to make a difference. It didn't. It traumatized the kid. He came in as a traumatized young man. So we gave him a math holiday. He didn't have to do any all year. And
I
guess
love
what?
it.
All his beautiful strengths came forward. And it turned out he had an eidetic memory. He loved reading. He was
Mhm.
teaching classes. He was filling out the little forms and doing that. He was loving the yoga. He loved it. I mean, he was a beautiful person.
Yeah.
But all they could see was a kid who couldn't do math, and they needed to meet, their objectives. And if
A-
he didn't meet
mhm.
that, he's a failure.
Yeah. And they missed out on who he was.
And they missed out on who he was, which was such a lovely little boy. Yeah, beautiful kid.
What is the last bit of advice that you would give parents thinking about leaving the system or new to homeschooling, and education with their kids is a whole new ball of wax? What
Yeah.
advice would you give them?
Well, I'd say, you know, as a former educator, I really get how scary it would be to come into something like this with no background at all, other than you went to school yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say give yourself a lot of grace, a lot of grace and space to learn what you need to learn, to know that this is going to be as much of a learning journey for you as it is for your children.
Mm.
And also to recognize that there's going to be a personal transformation involved as well,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
That you're going to go through. To expect that, to allow that, to know that sometimes there's going to be some struggle involved. There's going to be the hard moments where you just feel like I did when I was teaching. There were days where I felt like I never ever wanted to do it again, and other days where I couldn't imagine ever doing anything else.
Yeah.
There's going to be those times. So when that happens, just take a little step back, take a breath, and yeah, be graceful
Love
with
that.
yourself and self-forgiving.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Zara, thank you so much for taking the time with me today and sharing your experience and your love of education, of children, and how they learn. Um, Thank you for enriching me today. Thank you.
Oh, Janae, thanks so much. I've really loved our conversation. And
Likewise. Likewise.
yeah, really
So,
wonderful. Thank you.
likewise.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
your work in the
Oh,
world. You are
thank you.
articulating this whole systemic thing and the history behind it with such rigor. It's fantastic. I
Thank
love
you.
it.
I appreciate that. Well,
Yeah.
mamas and papas, grandmas and grandpas, you are doing so much better than you think you are. You got this, and we will talk next week.